Hello everyone, we are Jimena Peralta and Fatima Colon, and in today's video you will learn about the bar-headed goose adaptations for the Himalayas. Did you ever have the idea of one day climbing the biggest mountain in our planet, Mount Everest? The type of equipment that is required, and at some point you might get suffocated and need assistance of a tank of oxygen. And certainly, you don't expect to see lots of animals passing through the peak of that mountain, right? Well, did you know that there is one species of geese that actually travels through the Himalayas during their migrations? But what kind of species would ever go to this difficult environment just to migrate between Central Asia and India? Well, this is the answer in Vicus, or the bar-headed goose. His name represents the doubled bars in their heads that makes it easily to recognize them. This bird reaches altitudes of up to 7,270 meters during migration season. This animal belongs to the phylum Chordata and class Aves. They have many characteristics that help them during evolution to survive different threats, including habitat loss and, of course, disturbance of human activity. They are oviparous animals, and their breeding season is usually during summer, when the female goose lay from 2 to 8 eggs. But actually, both male and female take turns to incubate and protect the offspring for a period of 25 to 30 days. These geese inhabit Central Asia, including China and Mongolia, also the south with Nepal and Bangladesh. Another difference is the color of their feathers. Males and females have a notable difference between them, and like any other species in nature, males will always have more attractive colors. The adaptations they obtained during evolution are the key to the survival in their natural habitat, and like mentioned before, the migration season puts them in a really drastic climate. In the Tibetan Plateau, the minimum temperature is minus 30 degrees Celsius, and this is while the bar-headed goose travels through these enormous mountains. But their wing morphology can be beneficial in these altitudes. In 1972, a scientist proposed the idea that the enlarging of the wingspan and their reduced body weight, divided by the plane area, reduces the energy requirements. According to the Department of Zoology at the University of British Columbia back in 2008, this hypothesis was sustained since previous phylogenies and mitochondrial DNA showed a close relation to the bar-headed goose to the gray and Ross goose, who diverged from them from 2.5 to 0.5 million years ago, and they formed a monophyletic group. But there is a certain characteristic that separates the bar-headed from the rest. Their wingspan was bigger than all the rest, and this feature allows them to fly in conditions where the air is much less dense. This leads to the second adaptation, which helps them exercise in low oxygen conditions. They have been repeatedly observed above Mount Everest, but there, the air reduces from 30 to 50% compared to sea level. Therefore, they need real big lungs compared to most birds their size. According to the researcher Jessica Mier, these geese fly in those levels of hypoxia by reducing their metabolism rate. This was measured in the University of British Columbia, along with backpacks capable of regulating and measuring physiology, O2 consumption, and CO2 production. After those tests, they could see that the heart rate stayed the same. Adult geese experience more physiological changes, minutes or even hours to hypoxic conditions, and this can be modified by chronic acclimatization. But this depends on when the animal is exposed and the duration of that exposure. Another amazing characteristic is that the oxygen consumption in their high altitude and low altitude bar-headed goose changed drastically to a close relative, the barnacle geese, during progressive hypoxia. The frequency of breathing and the O2 diffusion were lower in the barnacle goose. The transport of oxygen requires flow from the atmosphere to the mitochondria, and their bigger hearts allows them with the diffusion of it. In 2018, another scientist published the results of the affinity to oxygen of the bar-headed goose, and they believed that their ancestors migrated the Himalayas millions of years ago, adapting these physiologies to survive the extreme conditions. But we've already talked about the nice weather they face. Maybe a little too cold. So, what happens with the heat? Well, their flights usually begin at nights or early in the morning. So, in really cold conditions, they have to reduce their thermoregulating cost by resting the day. And although their flights start during the night, the temperature is colder, but the wind currents favor them to reduce the energy cost. Breeding season also has a temperature cost, reducing almost 0.3 degrees Celsius, which help them to reduce the energetic cost. But a fun fact is that the decreasing of their temperature is much smaller than other species. The gray-lag geese reduces 4 degrees Celsius, or the barnacle geese with almost 4.4 degrees Celsius. So, why does these geese, which confronts difficult environments and needs to keep as much energy as they can, will reduce so little the temperature? Well, this species is considered the warmest at breeding grounds and the coldest at migration grounds, or better said, migrating mountains. Some species maintain lower temperatures prior migrating to have better fat storage, but the bar-headed goose has an incredible sensitivity to O2, like we mentioned before, and the adaptation is related to the improvement of hemoglobin and circulation of O2 through the blood, allowing them to resist cold temperatures. This adaptation was gradually developed. Scientists believe that their ancestor evolved thanks to the extreme geographic conditions of Asia. Their ability to fly in higher temperatures, all this in order to take advantage of the wind currents and avoid mountains like the rest of the species.
The muscle phenotype is a goose-flag muscle. This muscle can diffuse oxygen from the blood. Let's talk a little bit about this process. Red blood cells transport oxygen and nutrients. Platelets help heal wounds. White blood cells serve to protect against infection. And finally, have the transport of proteins that help regulate this entire process. In other words, the arteria and the vein are connected by means of a tissues or organs, where the respiration process is carried out with oxygen, nutrients, carbon dioxide, and waste, which come together and go to the vein, and this process goes to the heart to allow it to have oxygen throughout the body. This allows us to have better muscle capacity to improve oxygen transport in hypoxia. This ability is possessed by guests, for example, the Barcon goose, the Peking-footed goose, the red goose and bare-headed goose. These goose have a big difference between them because the barking goose, pigeon goose, and groundhog goose fly at low altitudes, while the barnyard goose flies at high altitudes. Goose-like muscle contain fast oxidative and fast glycolytic. The fast oxidative is a muscle fiber used primarily by aerobic respiration, and the fast glycolytic is a muscle fiber primarily used by anaerobic glycolysis. The flight muscle of a barnyard and pigeon goose have a significant proportion of fast glycogen fibers near the surface of the muscle, but the barnyard goose has a much higher proportion of fast oxidative fibers and more capillary per muscle. This oxygen diffusion capacity is greater in the muscle of the barnyard goose because it has more oxidative fibers that allow it to improve aerobic performance in hypoxia to fly at high altitudes. In addition, barnyard goose muscle has an effective system for transporting ATP equivalents and such the creatine kinase subunits. Cytochrome C oxidase. The ATP molecule is composed of four complexes: 1, 2, 3, and 4. But we are only going to talk about complex 4 or cytochrome C oxidase. The function of these enzymes is oxidative phosphorylation, where oxygen molecules join with water and ATP to generate chemical energy. This ability is found in all birds, but it can best observed in goose. In barnyard goose has an adaptation in cytochrome C oxidase that allowed them to fly at high altitude because has a better relationship with reduced cytochrome C, reflected is creating alteration in the genetic of cytochrome C oxidase. Hemoglobin. The function of hemoglobin is the transport of respiratory gases. It also serves to have a great affinity with oxygen. Hemoglobin consists of 2 alpha chains and 2 beta chains. It also made up of deoxyconformation is low affinity and oxyconformation high affinity. In the chains arrive oxygen molecule that bind with iron. This new compound goes through the body transporting oxygen. The hemoglobin of the barnyard goose has a change in the localization of alpha chains. These chains occur mainly in the hemoglobin sphere, SER alpha 18 and ALA alpha 190. This conformation change in hemoglobin allows barnyard goose to have a great affinity for oxygen at high altitudes. This adaptation that the barnyard goose has, it allowed them to survive and evolve to climate change. It can also be observed that there are extraordinary animals to fly without so much oxygen.